Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 599, and today's date is February 23rd, 2015, and the title of this episode is DHS Using Fear and a False Flag Event Because Their Budget is in Jeopardy. Let's get right into the economic collapse news. Now, we understand the Greek people, they elected the Syriza party because they promised no more austerity. They promised economic growth. They promised they weren't going to go along with more debt. They were going to get rid of the debt. And we can see right now the Syriza party decided to negotiate with the Eurogroup, and they came up with a 4-month extension. And this 4-month extension is going to do what for them? It gives them breathing space, of course. But the question is, did Cyprus cave, or are they planning something else? Are they negotiating with Russia and China and using this time period? Because when you look at this, if they do not follow through, the people of Greece are going to be very angry, and we might see an overthrow of the government. Now, Greece already missed their first commitment on delay reform list delivery. They said they were going to have that on Monday. Now they said they were going to have this on Tuesday. But what's very interesting is that a Syriza MP asked the $330 billion question. How will 4-month extension improve our negotiation position? Well, it won't. And the question is, why are we doing this? He's asking. Well, I'm hoping that they have another plan. Because if their plan is not to go with Russia or China, but to negotiate with the ECB, with the Eurogroup, they're going to force them to pay back this debt. Because they don't want the Syriza virus to spread across Europe. They don't want other countries to say, hey, wait a minute. Greece just got to write off that debt. We want the same exact thing. Russia has been holding out its hand saying, listen, if you come over to us, what we can do is we can remove the food ban. We're going to be building the gas pipeline in your country, and we can help you spur economic growth. What has the Eurogroup given them? We will give you debt, we'll give you more debt, and we will give you more debt. And of course, austerity will come along with this. So, hopefully, they're looking at the situation and giving themselves breathing room, because we know the maturity date does come up in 4 months, and we're hoping that they make the right decision, or this entire government is going to go down the tubes, and the people are going to say enough is enough, and they're going to kick them out. Because they've been dealing with all of this since 2008, and nothing has changed. This doesn't help the people right now. So we're going to continue to watch this to see what occurs. Now, here in the United States, we see the Dallas Fed manufacturing plunged in January. February's data plunged to a negative 11.2 against a negative 4 drop. This is the third miss in a row. So it looks like things are not going well. And we can see down in Texas, because of the oil suppression, they could lose somewhere in the range of about 150,000 jobs will be lost because of this. And the initial jobless claims in Texas is skyrocketing right now. And what's funny is the Texas initial jobless claims is skyrocketing, and the overall United States initial jobless claims are falling. How can this possibly be? Well, we know the U.S. government manipulates a lot of the numbers. They don't count those people, and of course they're not going to count those people who are losing their job in the oil sector. And we can see retail spending shows absolutely no sign of low gas price tax cut stimulus. And we've discussed this many, many times before when the U.S. government, the central bankers, and all the talking heads on the corporate media all thought, oh, since we're going to lower the gas prices, we're going to see economic growth in the retail sector. Well, we actually saw the opposite. We saw more and more stores close. We saw the holiday season a complete disaster, and it has not helped whatsoever. And we see the only way for the government, the central bankers, to prop up this entire economy are to do things they can control. They can control who gets loans. They can control the stock market. They can control the manipulated numbers like GDP, inflation, unemployment. They can control the suppression of oil. They can control the precious metals to make it look like the economy is doing well. But what happens is they create bubbles in certain areas, like the real estate market, like the auto industry, like the student loan industry, because they're trying to prop it up with crap, with junk. And when you create something using junk, you get junk back 10 times the amount that you put in. And this is what we're seeing right now. I mean, when we look at the auto loan industry, we see new and used vehicles, the amount of loans out there is approaching $1 trillion. And this is coming from Experian. But they're out there saying, and this is coming from Melinda Zabrinsky, the group director of automotive finance, whenever there is an uptick in the number of loans to subprime and deep subprime customers, there is a potential for the sky falling type of reaction. Well, we saw this happen in the real estate industry. But the reality is we are looking at a remarkably stable automotive loan market, in part because consumers are continuing to stay on top of their payments. Well, actually not. Actually, they're not telling the truth. As we all know, all these people do it because they're trying to make it seem like things are okay, and they're being directed to say, yes, things are okay. But when we look at the situation, we see early delinquencies. Borrowers who have missed a payment within the 8 months of origination are at the highest level since 2008. Subprime auto loans became AAA rating structure securities. Now, we saw this before in the real estate subprime market, where they said, oh, these are AAA, these are great investments, and the entire thing collapsed. About 31% of all outstanding auto loans balances are rated subprime right now. They're the foundation of the booming auto sales. The average APR on those loans are 19%. The original term length is 70 months. 75% of these loans had a loan-to-value ratio of over 105%. 81% of the borrowers had a FICO score less than 600. And some of the securities that these loans are turned into are rated AAA. Here we go again, and we know the delinquencies have risen, and we see a lot of people are getting their cars repossessed at this time. Every time an official or somebody comes out and says everything is fine, the subprime loans are perfect, people are really, paying them, we know it's the complete opposite. Government officials, central bankers, we know this is the complete opposite. You cannot build an economy on people who do not have work. Now, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with these people. I'm saying these people got dragged into a time frame in the U.S. where things went south. Back in 2008, people got a lot of their credit hurt. They couldn't find a job. They got laid off. They got part-time jobs. Their house was taken away, and they could never recover from what happened. And of course, their car's getting older, things are getting older, and they need to purchase these things, and they don't have the money. And the only way to do this is to go in and get a loan. And of course, they're subprime because they had things happen to them. They had to go in and get loans. And they realized that as they keep working, or maybe one of the stores they were working for, that store closed, or they laid off people because sales are so bad, they're back in the same situation. And this is not going to get better anytime soon. It's actually going to get worse as time goes on. And as I've been reporting all of this, we have seen that things have definitely gotten worse, not better. Even though the government, President Obama, continually tells us that everything is perfectly fine. We're in a recovery. You just can't feel it. I know you have that feeling of bills. I know you have that feeling of not enough money coming in. I know you have that feeling of, oh my God, how am I going to make that next car payment or rent payment? But trust me, we're in a recovery. And we know we're not. Come on. The existing home sales have plunged. Home builder sentiment slipping. Of course, this is all blamed on the weather. Architecture, billings down, lumber prices down. it should not be totally surprising that existing home sales collapsed in January, which they just did, tumbling negative 4.9% against expectations of negative 1.8%. Now, here we are once again. The real estate industry is completely falling apart. It's not getting better. Of course, they're blaming this all on the weather. And when we look at the data and we look at the information, we can see the biggest drop in home sales. Guess what? It was in the West. You know, where it's warm, dry, sunny. There's no snow. It's not frigid like the Northeast. But of course, they want you to believe that it's the weather. That's the problem. It's the weather that's doing this. But no, it is not the weather. And when we look at this, we see existing home sales change. Well, for the month of January in the Northeast, down negative 6%. South, negative 4.6%. Midwest, negative 2.7%. West, negative 7.1%. Realtors are reporting that low rates are attracting potential buyers, but the lack of new and affordable listings is leading to some delay decisions. Seriously? Are they really trying to convince us that there are less homes on the market? Because if this is true, where would prices go? They would go up. But guess what? Prices are falling. The actual opposite is happening. Now, when the government told the banks to keep certain houses off the market, those foreclosures, have the people who haven't paid their mortgage, keep them in the houses. We're not going to put them as foreclosures. Let them take care of it. House prices went up. And now they're trying to convince us that there's hardly any houses on the market and house prices are falling. Well, that's not how it works. And this is how you know they're not telling us the truth of what's really going on in the housing market. We also have evidence because the major mortgage companies, banks like Wells Fargo, Bank of America, JP Morgan Chase, they all started laying off their people in the mortgage department going as far back as August of 2013 when Obama gave his speech in Phoenix, Arizona to let us all know that the housing market is right now in a huge recovery phase. And as he was giving that speech, all of those banks laid off tens of thousands of people in their mortgage departments. And it has continued all the way up to the present time. Why would you lay off all of these people if the housing market is in a recovery? They already know it is not. The Fed is pumping in free money, giving it to hedge funds, investment companies, foreign investors to purchase houses in cash. No need for the mortgage departments because they're purchasing in cash. They told them to buy these houses, hold on to them, rent them if you can. But guess what? Now they're trying to unload them because they realize it's time to get out. And they can't. So there's a flood of houses on the market. And when you have a flood of houses on the market, what happens to prices? They come down. This is what we're seeing right now. Now, of course, the government is trying to use everything they possibly can to continually prop this up. They create different programs like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. You know, the 3% down, subprime borrower, just get anyone in there. But it's not working. Not working whatsoever. People are tapped out. They have nothing left. They're broke. Their credit has been ruined. And we're moving closer and closer to a collapse. I mean, look at the Baltic Dry Index. It is at its lowest point. And if you don't know what that is the raw material that is used for manufacturing. When people go to different areas and they purchase goods, manufacturers will produce. To get that material, they need raw material. And these are the ships that carry the raw material. And what we're seeing right now is a complete collapse of the entire system because people aren't buying. Manufacturers don't have to produce and they don't have to order the raw materials. So we can see right now that even shippers are saying that this is the worst market condition since the 1980s. And bulk shippers are filing for bankruptcy. This is the second one already that is filed for bankruptcy because it is awful right now. The economy is reeling. The United States government, central bankers, they're in a corner right now trying to figure out how can we prop this up a little bit longer, because we need to get this war started. We need everyone's eyes off of us, and we need to blame some other group or country for this entire economic collapse. Now, the Baltic Dry Index moved up last week about 2 or 3 points. It has started to drop down again 1 point to 512 points. So it's bouncing around, but this is at its lowest level, even lower that of August of 1986, which I think it was around 540 or so, around that number. And when we look at the American people today, and not just Americans, people in other countries, they're having a very rough time, because you remember in those countries, they had to impose austerity in France, in Spain, in Italy, in Greece, in Cyprus, and a lot of people are out of work. But here in the United States, we have the Fed, which creates money out of thin air. We have programs where people will get food assistance. But people are still struggling. Even though you don't see it, people are struggling. 2 of 5 Americans are one bill away from a complete disaster. They're living on the edge of financial ruin. If anything should happen, guess what? They're done with. If anything unexpected happens, a bill comes in or some type of emergency, they're done. About 24% have more credit card debt than emergency savings, while another 13% have neither credit card debt nor emergency savings. And this is coming from Bankrate.com. This is a survey they put out there. And let me just say, it is getting harder and harder for people to survive. And as time goes on, everyone is going to start to wonder and scratch their heads saying, what is going on here? Especially when the economy starts to collapse. And we will see this. When you see gold prices starting to move up, and I'm not talking about $10, $20, when you see it go up $70, $60, $80 every day, you know something's going on here. Yes, we see fluctuations and the central bank drops it back down. But you will know, you will see things happen. You will see war being really pushed out in the Middle East, in Eastern Europe, and you'll see more fighting going on. I mean, we have seen more fighting, but it will become more intense. That means we're getting very, very close to the collapse. And when we look at all the countries around the world, in the private central bank world, I should say, we see that their debt to GDP is over 300%. Japan, Ireland, Singapore, Portugal, Belgium, Greece, Spain, Denmark, all have debt to GDP ratio over 300%. The United States is at 233%. And this makes it very, very rough for every single country. And let me just say, it comes out to be about 39% of the countries have debt to GDP over 100%. This cannot be sustained. You can see it in Greece. That was the experiment, if you like to call it that. They kept giving them debt, debt, debt. They kept having austerity, people out of work, people out of work. What happened? Basically, their country collapsed. That's really what it is. Their country has collapsed. Youth unemployment over 60%. Overall unemployment 30%. Actually, most likely it's much, much worse than that. But those are the government numbers. We can see right now that they have so much debt, there's no way out of this. The only way out of it is to say, you know what? Let's write this off. So their country really collapsed. People living on the streets all over the place. They have no way of getting food. And there's no shelter for them. The same thing is going to happen in all the private Western central bank countries. Now, of course, they're going to blame this on something else, but it will not stop the collapse. That will happen because there's no way to stop it. They're just going to mask it with something else, like war. Remember when Obama was out there And he continually tells us all these different lies. Now you have to remember, Obama is just a pawn. He takes orders from above, from the central bankers, from the elite, and what to do. But again, we can just see by all of these people, every government official that's out there, they always tell us the opposite of what's really going on. They never tell us the truth. They always make us believe something else, and they back it up with more lies. I mean, if we look back at what Obama has told us, I mean, we see that he really didn't tell us the truth. He said we reject torture and stand for the rule of law. This was back in June 2008. And then, of course, August of 2014, we tortured some folks. We did some things that were contrary to our values. Well, one minute you're against torture, and the next minute it's okay to just torture a couple people, even though they weren't convicted of any type of crime whatsoever. Might does not make right. Citizens, like nations, will never settle for a world where the big are allowed to bully the small. Well, then he said, that was back in September of 2014, then he said, we occasionally have to twist the arms of countries that wouldn't do what we need them to do, February 2015. So, now he's saying that we are bullies. I shouldn't say we. The government is bullies to other nations, and we know that they are. The president announced that lifting the embargo against Cuba in January 2015 is the right thing because sanctions just don't work. Then, of course, and that was in January of 2015, and right after that, he said Russia is isolated with its economy in tatters due to sanctions. I mean, none of this even makes sense. It's almost like the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare. You can keep your doctor. Well, 7 million people lost their doctor. Actually, I mean, you can keep your doctor, you can keep your insurance. 7 million people lost that completely. It's going to be affordable, the insurance. Well, we've seen it rise 2 times already. Nothing he is telling us is the truth. And if you look at all the government officials, most of them, it's exactly the same. If you look at the central bank, it's exactly the same. Whatever they're telling us, it is always the opposite. Now, going back many, many reports, I can't even remember how many at this point, I talked about how they were putting up blimps around Washington, Maryland, and we talked about how they were going to use them to surveil the people. And of course, the government was out there telling us, no, they're going to be used, for detection of missiles and other things like that. But we can see right now, the U.S. Army is using the giant blimp to surveil movements of Maryland residents. And I have a video on the X22Report.com site, and you can see this right there, how they are viewing every single person. And we know this is all about keeping track of every single person. I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of these blimps pop up all over the United States to watch everyone, to keep track of everyone. Because right now they're doing it through the social media. They're doing it with facial recognition, with cameras on the streets. This would help them out because this way they'd be able to follow them. And you have to remember, the new real IDs are going to have an RFID chip in them. They're going to have a barcode in them. And when I look at the situation and I look at what's going on here, it would make sense for them to put up blimps all across the United States to monitor where each person is with their RFID chip when the real ID system goes into full swing in 2016. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see more of these blimps being put up all over the place to surveil us. Now, the French minister is urging Facebook, Twitter, and Google to cooperate with the French. The French Interior Minister said that a special meeting in the U.S., he asked Google, Facebook, Microsoft, and Twitter to help French officials facilitate investigations. We emphasize that when an investigation is underway, we don't want to go through the usual government-to-government channels, which can take so long. We just want you internet companies to give us all the information we want on anyone that we ask, so we can investigate, so we can keep track. And we can see that, Facebook, Twitter, this is your private information. there is no reason to give this over to a foreign government. Or if Facebook is in their government, there's no reason for them to give this over. It's private to you. And you have not been involved in a crime or anything like that. There's no reason to ask for this. And I believe in most of the countries they need to get a warrant. And this is why they're trying to bypass the system completely. Because it's too time consuming. We don't want to go through the laws. We want to go around it. Well, I'm sorry, but you need to abide by what is here in the United States and in other countries to get the information. Now, out in Japan, we understand, and we discussed this many times, where Japan wants to rewrite their constitution, especially Article 9. They're putting in a proposal to amend the current provisions that give more direct power to the Joint Staff Act. And we can see that Abe is moving away from the pacifist stance fixed in the country's post-World War II constitution. This so-called reinterpretation enables Japan to come to the aid of the U.S. or other allies, even if Japan is not the target of the attack, in a provision allowing collective self-defense. Last month, the Japanese government approved the country's largest military budget in 70 years in a display of force to its highly militarized neighbors. And they're doing this because they're getting ready for the next war. The United States is pushing them. They want to help out in the Pacific, which basically is the pivot to the Pacific to encircle China. They understand this. The United States is moving to a different location on the Japanese island, to a bigger base, so they can bring in more advanced weapons. People are protesting, of course, because they don't want this to happen. And we know why all this is being done. All of this is being done because we are heading towards war. Now, we hear a lot about how the United States is always for the democracy, the freedom. We have to back the people. They want a government change. Now, they do this when they don't have a puppet government already ruling over that country where they can control it. It's called regime change. If they have a puppet government, they call the other people who don't want them there terrorists. But under the United Nations, the General Assembly Resolution 2625, we see that it's the Declaration on Principles of International Law concerning friendly relations and cooperation among states. And this was adopted by the General Assembly on October 24th, 1970, during a commemorative session to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the United Nations. The Declaration worked out the most authoritative and comprehensive formulation so far for the principle of self-determination. According to this document, the principle of equal rights and self-determination of peoples enshrined in the Charter of the United Nations embraces the right of all peoples freely to determine, without external interference, their political status and to pursue their economic, social, and cultural development, as well as the duty of every state to respect this right in accordance with the provisions of the Charter. It further added the establishment of a sovereign and independent state, the free association or integration with an independent state, or the emergence into any other political status freely determined by the people, constitute modes of implementing the right of self-determination, thus stressing as the critical issue the message of reaching the decision and not the result. But they don't talk about this because they don't want you to know this. The people in Crimea, the people in the southeast, they have this right for self-determination under General Assembly Resolution 2625. Do you hear the corporate media talking about this? Absolutely not. They don't want people to know this. In the Middle East, the people who are rising up in Yemen, the people who are rising up in Libya, in Lebanon and Iraq, they have this right. But they keep it a secret. They don't want anyone to know about this. And this is why they need to use the word terrorists once they have control of the country. And of course, as they call them terrorists, they're able to use such laws that they enact to bring in armed forces, drone attacks to keep these people back. So you see what's going on here. And when we look at Ukraine, we see this is exactly what's going on. The southeastern people do not agree with the puppet regime that the United States put in there from the coup d'etat that cost $5 billion. They staged the whole thing for regime change. But guess what? The central bankers don't like what happened here. They paid for the entire country, and they cannot let any section of the country go, even if it violates the UN resolution. It doesn't matter. They don't care. They only go under the law that they want to, and all the others they just throw out. Because they're on a different plane of existence. They decide which laws pertain to them and which laws don't. Now we see out in Ukraine, Moscow right now has banned over 100 media news organizations. They don't want them in there. They're throwing them out, and they're creating their own TV propaganda and internet news stations to give you their side of the truth, which is all propaganda all of the time. And you can see what they're doing because they need to lock down the country. They need to convince the people of what they are saying, and not what the outside is saying is really happening there. And we know what's really happening there. I mean, it's done here in the United States. All the news on the corporate media, it's all propaganda. There's no investigation. There's nothing. They're getting it fed from the U.S. government. And then they just go ahead and repeat what they told them to say. That's pretty much it. Because they own the corporate media. There's only 5 companies or so that own them. And they're linked right into the U.S. government central bankers. Now, Russia's going to send humanitarian aid, and we see Kiev doesn't want this aid to come in. They're going to be bringing in food, medicines, daily essentials, and other items that they need. They've done this many, many times. But Kiev, they are saying they have not received any type of notification that they're going to bring in this humanitarian aid. Now, they've said this many times before, and in reality, they did receive the notification. What they're trying to do is stop this humanitarian aid coming in. They want the people there to suffer. Actually, they would like it if they could just kill everyone in that region. Actually, it was said by a lot of the government officials in Kiev. And we see in Kiev, in Ukraine, things are getting worse there. It is not getting better. Right now, starting April 1st, the gas prices in Ukraine will increase by 4 times, according to the country's Minister of Energy. The Ukrainians are paying right now 1,089 hryvnia for 1 cubic meter of gas. Starting April 1st, it's going to be 4,138. How is this going to affect the people of this country? It's going to hit them very hard. The International Monetary Fund, the main creditor of Ukraine, pushed Kiev to raise the consumer tariffs in Ukraine so they would match Western Europe levels. So basically, this country is imploding on itself. People cannot sustain this. They don't even have work there. And the value of the hryvnia, it continually drops. It is going to be horrific, and the people are going to look around and say, you know what, enough is enough. Are we better off now? Since the U.S. had a regime change and put in a puppet government? No. We have economic collapse, we're in war, and the men and women who provided for the families are out fighting. And most of them don't even come back. So they're not better off now. Security forces in Ukraine are now blocking entry to Ukraine's eastern regions. This is coming from the Donetsk People's Republic. They said that Ukraine has completely blocked these self-proclaimed Donetsk and Lugansk areas. No one can leave without a pass. Residents in Donetsk and Lugansk has become a guarantee of no access to Ukraine whatsoever. So they're blocking the borders, they're blocking entrance into Ukraine, they're keeping everyone in this area. And we can see right now, Congress is out there and they're saying Ukraine ceasefire will hardly make any difference whatsoever. it looks like they're going to be pushing lethal weapons, and this is the direction they're heading in. Ukraine army puts off withdrawal of their heavy weapons, saying, oh, the rebels, they're continually firing on us. Actually, what's happening is they were never going to remove their heavy artillery. Actually, they're pushing it closer to the front lines. They're maneuvering it, and they're using the excuse that they can't withdraw right now. If they stop shelling the Donetsk area, the civilians, the DPR armies wouldn't fire back. But they don't want this to stop. They want war. Their instructions from the central bankers, from the U.S. government, is war. Period. The end. Poroshenko is out there. He's saying Crimea is going to come back to Ukraine. He is pledged to bring Crimea under Ukraine's control. The Ukrainian state will regain control over this temporary occupied territory. I'm not saying that this will be a simple thing to do, which we will go through quickly, but this will happen by all means. We've said this. We've said after the southeastern region, they're going to go after Crimea. And we can see they're getting prepared for this. Kiev right now is definitely pulling its weapons up to the conflict zone in eastern Ukraine. This has been confirmed by the Donetsk People's Republic. They said, yes, they've moved their weapons. We're pulling back, and every time we pull back, they're moving their weapons forward. So you can see they're playing this little game here. Because again, the central bankers did not get what they paid for, and they're going to push war as hard as they possibly can. Now, Russia is continually signing more and more deals around the world. They signed a deal with the United Arab Emirates. They're going to be getting Russian-made 57mm caliber naval gun mounts. The Russian minister also expressed confidence that the United Arab Emirates will also offer new joint defense projects to Russia in the near future. So we can see Russia has been dealing with Iran, Syria, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Egypt. They're making deals all throughout the Middle East, in Africa, South America, anywhere they possibly can. And they're going to continue doing this. Same with China. On the other hand, the United States is placing military assets every single place and bringing in soldiers because they're ready to make war. And this is what happened when the fiat currency it implodes on itself, where it's the end. They have no alternative but for war. And this is where we're headed. Now, out in the Middle East, we understand that Yemen, Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, the people in each one of these countries are rising up. The Islamic State, that's a distraction. That's to convince you that there's terrorists out there. That's to convince you that we need to go into these countries. Why do you think they've been playing up these beheading videos, the Egyptians, and all of this? And a lot of it is fake. Some of it is real. Some of it's not even the Islamic State. They're dressed up. It's green screened. It's all for propaganda to convince you that things are getting worse. To get everyone all riled up and say, oh my God, we need to go to war. We need to go in there. That's what they're used for. Their forces aren't that big. When they talk about hundreds of thousands of people, they're talking about the people of these countries. And again, think about what they're doing. They're calling them the Islamic State. Remember, they're the terrorists. Because these are the people who want their countries back, and they have the right to do so. And they know it under the UN Charter. They have the right for self-determination. But they don't want anyone to know this, and that's why they call them terrorists. And this is why they're trying to get the authorization for war, because if they don't, they will lose Yemen, Libya, Lebanon, Iraq, and they will sell the oil not using the dollar. If they do that, other countries will not have to use the dollar to purchase the oil. If they don't have to use the dollar, where does the dollar go? It flows back to the United States. That means we have a huge amount of dollars coming back, which gives us hyperinflation, which means the dollar collapses. It's no longer backed up by oil. It's no longer the petrodollar. And they're trying to prevent this from happening before they can get some type of war going to take everyone's eyes off the central bank system. That's all they're doing. They don't care about you. Central banks have no allegiance to country, to any government. The allegiance is to themselves. And they will create war because it benefits on both sides. These governments have to borrow from us. These governments have to borrow us again to rebuild. They always make out on the deal and they restart the system. And while we're headed towards the end game, what do? They loot every single country. Now, as we talked about, Turkey is continually firing into Syria. They're bringing troops over there, and right now Syria has sent letters to the head of the Security Council of the United Nations, Secretary General, on the recent Turkish transgressions in Syria. They're saying they are coming over the border. They are not doing it. They're not giving an announcement, and they're firing into Syria. We see the United States government, central bankers, and the coalition forces all building up their military assets in the Middle East. Right now, France has deployed its Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier against the Islamic State. So we see the United States is continually maneuvering troops into Kuwait, into Iraq, and the coalition forces are also building up their forces because they are getting ready for a major offensive throughout the Middle East, then leading up to Syria, then Iran. And they do this very slowly. There's no boots on the ground. They're just advisors. These advisors, we need another 1,000. We need another 2,000. We have a division headquarters we're setting up, but don't worry about that. We're not going to put boots on the ground. We need an air base. We're not going to do anything there. We're just going to put all the 30,000 troops there. We're bringing military assets into Kuwait, but don't look at that. We have another 4,000 troops. Italy's sending about 5,000 troops. We're not doing anything here. Don't worry about it. Look the other way. They're getting ready for war. Obama has the authorization for war. Yeah, but I don't want war, but I'm going to give the authorization for war. And hopefully Congress votes on it and says, yes, let's go to war. I'm hoping they do the opposite. We don't want war. This is all made up. Now, we understand the budget is going to be voted on for DHS, and Obama is out there, and he's saying, if there is a partial shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security, it would mean that 100,000 Border Patrol, port inspectors, and airport security agents would be left without a paycheck. It will have a direct impact on our economy. And the people of America won't be safe. Well, let me just say, all these people have never stopped any terrorists whatsoever. They have done nothing. Actually, the Border Patrol agents were given instructions to let the illegals to come over, so we know that's false. But it's funny how he says 100,000 they will not get pay, and this will hurt the economy. But I thought the economy was doing so well, we're in a recovery. How come he's never said anything about the 150,000 people who are unemployed in Texas and other states because of the oil suppression? Well, wouldn't that hurt the economy? How come it's only these 100,000? Basically, what he's doing is he is using propaganda, just like DHS is doing, telling us that there's going to be a mall event where Al-Shabaab is going to be attacking maybe a mall in the UK or US. We don't know. We think it might be the Mall of America. Now, Jay Johnson is out there and he's giving mixed messages, saying, yes, we've seen the video, but we have no evidence of it. But you need to pass my budget because of these type of events. Well, let me just say, if they pass the budget, this event will disappear. If they don't pass the budget, we most likely will see a false flag event in a mall somewhere around the United States. How do we know that they are planning on this? Well, the U.S. has been practicing staging mock mall attacks to test some type of terrorist attack inside a mall. This is how we know they're ready for it, to use at any time they need to use it. Just like Sandy Hook, the shooting there. Just like the Boston bombing. They prepare, they get ready, they use it when they need it. Look at Canada with their false flag. Look at France, look at Australia. All of these are false flag. They're not real. Yes, do people die in it? Some people die. Some people don't. It all depends on the false flag. 9/11, a lot of people died. I know a couple people that died in 9/11. So when people think of a false flag, it's not always completely fake where nobody sees anything. Sometimes people do get hurt and die because they need to push the point out there to show, yes, they're dangerous. But a lot of them we see are faked. Especially those videos they capture when they're always in the right place to capture them. And we can see with the warning from DHS right now, they're using it for a specific agenda. Their budget. If they don't get it, 100,000 people are not going to get their paycheck, and the private police force of the White House won't be out there. This is what they're worried about. And if they don't get their budget passed, we will see the event most likely. If the budget is passed, guess what? It will disappear. But again, all of this has been readied for something much bigger later on. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.